Welcome to the GamesNet Berlin Europe podcast. Here, we speak with extraordinary games industry professionals and listen to their story, to learn all about what they've built and who they are. GamesNet Berlin Europe is the international games industry initiative of MediaNet Berlin-Brandenburg, the networking association for the media, creative and digital industries in Germany's capital region. My name is Simon Ohler, and I will be your host for this program. Today, we are speaking with Sophie Vo, a fellow podcaster running her show Rise and Play, where she also, like us, speaks with very interesting and amazing games industry people who share their insights. And what Sophie cares about is leadership in the games industry and making it, good, making it sensitive, making it empathetic, making it human-centered. So Sophie has a great philosophical approach to life, which she shares a lot about, and she does so very clearly, because she not only is a inner world journeyer, philosopher, but she's also a very pragmatic, outside practical world leader. So she kind of acts as a translator between the two worlds, and like I said, she does so very beautifully. This is a very special episode, both because Sophie has some very special insights to share, which will inspire you for sure, and also because it's the last episode of GamesNet Berlin Europe podcast. It's episode 22. We've been running the show for 2 years now, and we want to say thank you for listening. Also, a shout out to Games Capital Berlin, your gate to the games industry in Berlin. If you've got anything to do with games and Berlin, check out gamescapital.berlin. And thank you and shout-outs to everyone who has funded, supported, and worked with us on this project. Thank you very much. We will probably be back, the same team, the same spirit, Florian, Simon, with another podcast that's related to another project by MediaNet. But for now, we want to say thank you for listening and, well, goodbye to GamesNet Berlin Europe. But before that, sit back, relax, and enjoy our beautiful conversation with Sophie Vo.
Hello and welcome to the GamesNet Berlin Europe podcast. My name is Florian and I'm one of the hosts of this show. The other is my co-host Simon. Hello, Simon.
Hello, good evening, sir.
First off, we have an announcement to make for housekeeping's sake. This episode is our last episode for the Berlin Europe podcast. We are recording this at the beginning of February 2023, and the project will finish at the end of the month. So this episode is special, and we want to thank all of you for listening and following and joining our journey with this. We have plans to return with a podcast for the follow-up project to GamesNet Berlin Europe, but cannot yet announce a definitive date for this. So keep your ears tuned and your subscriptions going. We will return on this frequency. Our final guest is Sophie Vo, actually a fellow podcaster running her show Rise and Play, where she also speaks with very interesting and amazing games industry people who share their insights. I can highly recommend checking out Rise and Play. She also does super informative content around the topic of hiring and building teams on her YouTube channel, which we will definitely link in the show notes. And she has years of management experience, for example, currently as GM of Savage Games, but also as a previous studio manager at Voodoo or working as game lead at Rovio and having worked at studios like Wuga and Gameloft. She has several advisory positions and is an investor in different projects. Welcome to the show, Sophie. How are you?
Great. Very nice introduction. It's like I said, it's a strange, very meta experience for me to be sitting as a guest on a podcast. So I appreciate as well kind of a mirror situation, and I feel so honored. I didn't know about it to be closing at least this series. So let's make it special today. So I'm excited about it.
Super. Yeah. Actually, we thought about this and thought, well, since this is, it was a coincidence, to be fair, so we didn't plan this, but since you have a kind of similar experience in terms of podcasting, we thought let's maybe start a little different than usual and get your take as a fellow podcaster on your experience and what interviewing these people and your journey with it, how this, what impact it has on you in your day to day and what it does for you as a games professional, but also personally.
So is this a question?
Yes.
Okay. Well, I can relate, of course, like about the demand, of producing a podcast. I can see as well all the care and the work you put into it on preparing. So it's like it's producing content, right? So you craft, you have a vision of who you would like to invite in your future episodes, what you would like to talk about, organize, schedule, record, editing, post-production, and promoting, marketing. So it's a whole, 360 of a business. But for me, definitely, I've enjoyed every part of it, although it's a lot of work for multiple reasons. Like one is really continuing to develop my thinking on the topics of leadership. And it's not like one by just reading books and having a fixed knowledge, but it's evolving with people. So when I have conversation with influential leaders of industry, it's always like catching up, being up to date of what's happening, what are the other ways of doing things, perspective. So in a way, it's just a professional networking call that is happening, but that I record. And the other, I would say, impact more on a personal level for me doing the podcast was really finding a bit my North Star of the things that I will do no matter what the job I do and what I actually do in the job specifically, because something I've seen in the recent years, it's intense working in games and especially mobile games. Companies come and go, they scale down, they scale up, scale down, they change business. And so being attached to a job of a company is not very realistic. So I wanted to create something for myself independently where this is my thing. I have a creative control and I don't have to stress about it every morning based on the financial state of the company or the market. And so this has been my main side project, but also where I have my personal motivation to put energy into thinking about, again, leadership, team, culture, organization, economy, psychology, how the humans are factored into what we call a company or making games. And that is a topic of passion for me. So those are the main reasons, still doing it today. And I have those moments sometimes where, I feel I could stop, but usually I postpone this thought, let some time pass, and then I come up with new creative ideas and then change, the series. And then I find excitement to give it a new energy. So I understand as well this phase for you, taking a step back, figuring out, what do you want to do with it, based on your learning. And it's important that you keep you as the host of it, energy in what you're doing and, like energy and interest. And if it's no more there, then it's a sign that, maybe it needs a switch because it starts with you.
Yeah, that's actually, I found myself in many of your remarks there. I can relate a lot. So I'm actually very glad that we chose to go about it this way, because it really makes sense to talk about it. I don't usually talk to too many people who do their own podcasts. So that's really interesting. What I wanted to know is, are you doing your podcast all on your own? Are you doing the whole preparation and production and everything? Or how does it work? Do you have help?
Yeah, so it has evolved. When I started alone and not taking it too seriously that I would even continue a year after, to be honest. It was an experiment. I wanted to try. I wanted to learn how to make podcasts, and I needed a platform to express and dialogue with other leaders in the industry. So I did it for some time alone, and you can call it serendipity, life, luck, opportunities. I met last year my partner who works in podcasts as well. It was just a coincidence. He is a producer in podcast for coffee. So history of coffee, science of coffee. So really creating quality content. And so he gave me a lot of tips there, like on how inefficient I was doing things. And when it was 2 hours collating, he's like, why I do it? So I was using, to go maybe on the nerdy side of a podcast, editing work.
Let's go.
I was using Audacity and I was like doing everything manually. So I was spending a good 4 hours to edit one episode. But it was fun when I was starting and I was not thinking like long-term scalability. And then he showed me the script later where the software does a lot of things for you to streamline or remove certain words, certain empty space just to cut quickly. And then I thought he works with editors. So I never thought of paying someone to actually help me on the podcast just to explain the thinking, I was thinking like, what is the most important time I should spend on the call to make the podcast what it is? And so it's sourcing the guests, creating the connection, even the preparation, the interview time. But editing, it's not where I do something magical special. So then when I started to think of it this way, it's like, what is the value of my time, like monetarily? And I did like a rough calculation in numbers, like, okay, my 1 hour of my time is that amount of money. And so when I evaluated how much it would cost to have an editor doing it, then it was a no-brainer that I should pay an editor to do it. So I started to work with editors that I found in my network and in James, my partner, network. And they take all that part, and it has been a relief. And then I started to have sponsors who saw the show growing, and they really wanted to support what I was doing, the mission. So brand sponsoring, and that eventually like financed the whole editing work. But I started just to invest more in the quality of the podcast and split my time in what I should do, and then into money in what the things that others could do for me. And I wanted to say at last, in terms of help, it's something new I tried this year. So maybe as an inspiration for you, I created a community of conscious leaders with Rise and Play through a Slack group. So it's invite only. And I brought there all the speakers. So I have today 55 or 60 speakers. And my idea was to share the work in the sense like, instead of me always coming up with ideas and work, I consult actually this community and say, okay, what are the things on your mind? What are the things that you would love to hear about, talk about? And let's repeat segments of content. You know the podcast, you've participated before. What would you like to talk about again this year? And we do this together and we craft content together. So now I have help from a community. You can think of it like crowd collaboration,
Nice.
but that has helped me as well to distribute the work and not just rely on my own brain and energy to come up with ideas.
That's actually super interesting because for us, the podcast, I guess, as well as for you, it's a side project, and for us, it's the same. That this is not our main thing that we do. So we also think about how we can like make more out of the podcast, and since this podcast belongs to an international networking project, we basically try to use or use sounds weird, but to connect with our guests also as sort of ambassadors of the program, having them share that this program exists, that there's like an international program for Berlin to meet people, and so we also have them as sort of anchors in different countries. Maybe if we plan a delegation travel or something, and go and expand on that kind of the network. So I think that's a very good idea that you had there.
Thanks.
Yeah, I'm really thrilled that we're talking, Sophie, because I feel like we kind of have the same or a similar profile. So I feel a very kindred spirit because you're, of course, in industry professional, and you are a content creator, and you're something like a philosopher. You know, you have values and stances, and you try to bring them into the world through talking about it, and also through acting it out. And so I hope we can cover this territory of your life, and maybe how that developed as well adequately in today's podcast, and maybe also nerd out a bit about content production. It's kind of my little intro here. And well, my question about content is still, you know, I was quite impressed with your course, because you made like a course, you know. I'm sure you know, because you made it. And my sense that I had was similarly to how you described starting your podcast, that you recorded it quite simply. You know, it didn't seem like a very complicated thing. It seemed like you had a script and a computer and a camera and a mic, and that's it. Is that true? And did you never feel like you needed more equipment or skills or something to do that right? You know, how did you approach that?
It's you know, you're sending me back at some time. It was probably 2 years ago during COVID, which was a strange time if we think about it, when we were all like spending most of our time at home and with a distorted sense of reality. So that's how I started the masterclass, where I understanding myself. I like to create things, and I usually like to go out, learn new activities, have hobbies. Especially Berlin is super active, so I like to go to exhibitions. So I was just really craving for that, missing it. So I felt like an urge to create, and I think something that inspired me, because sometimes it's not always conscious. It's probably Joachim from Elite Game Developer. When I saw he created a masterclass about angel investment, and when I saw him doing it, also quite in a simple way, like very lean startup, I thought maybe I could try. You know, it's not low expectation, so it won't do any harm. Nobody will notice. So it was more of a fun exercise at home. And my partner had all the equipment. I always have my partner involved in my tech projects. I feel like this is, you know, like the influencers where you have a guy like handling the camera. This is kind of my situation where well, he had all the photography equipment, microphone, like even I have another friend who's a photographer, and they had like this thing that you capture the light so it doesn't put too much light on my face. So I had professionals around me who were more interested in creating the setup. So it was more as like a collaborative project where I wanted to create the content, and others around me were interested in using the equipment, the technology of the equipment. So that's how we made the setup at home. And what I thought, I think also what I remember now, I felt frustrated at the time, where I had many things to share and I had a lot of energy to give to create a healthy culture. And I was at Voodoo at a time where we were really operated as independent studios. And I saw things at on the management level from the headquarters that I thought were really not putting like humans at the center, or how, you know, we could, I would say, treat people with a bit more empathy. So I really try to pass the message internally, make the change from the inside. And I realized that if you're not part of the top level leadership of a company, almost to the point you are the CEO, it's really hard to change. And that has been my conclusion in most companies I've been. I could change, influence my group, my team, where I'm in a position of power to a certain group, but I can't change the environment I'm in unless I'm the CEO. So when I felt powerless at the time, I thought maybe I'm thinking too small. Maybe I should just share what I have to say, and for whoever is concerned, resonates with it. For people, many people were also opening their company. I thought, why not creating the content, all the things I've learned, doing it at Voodoo, putting it out there and see what happens. That's why I approach it in such a humble way, in a way. So
Yeah.
I recorded with Loom or just screen recording. Put myself in front of the camera. I did 1 or 2 takes maximum, I think, and then just went through the content. Like I would talk to someone in a one-on-one conversation, trying to explain what I'm doing. And I just did it in one go, and it took me 2 weekends, I think, to record each masterclass was a weekend, and then done a bit of editing, and then that's what you saw.
I think this goes a little bit away from the content creation itself, but what you described about your experience in Voodoo and making change in a company and influencing the environment is one of the points that I was really looking forward to when looking into like having you on the show. And this is like, it's perfect that you brought it up in this way. That is a very good point to latch onto and go from there, which is, do you like this need to influence your environment? Because I think that this is people, you have to have some kind of need or an urge in yourself to want to make a place better for people, or to let's say streamline processes, but that's more on the technical side. But in general, like to try to create an environment for people where they can thrive. And I think that's a very amazing quality of a person. Can you tell us a little bit about how you found yourself in this kind of position, or what sparked your interest of wanting to be that person?
Mm-hmm. It's more of a result, I would say, of personal work and personal development, where I think that work started back in 2016, 17, when I was in Finland. Really understanding a bit like my why, in a way. How could I use my time and energy in this world for this limited amount of time, you know?
Mm-hmm.
I read also during COVID a lot about Stoicism, and that made me reflect, about the temporary nature of our lives. And you think you have 20 years to live, and sometimes you have less. So I like to approach every day, and this is where we go in the philosophical side of my life. In how can I make the most of the day that gives me energy, right? So like having
Mm-hmm.
motivation to wake up every day, and where in some way I would also contribute in a way that add value to the world. So it was a long process, of course, to figure out how could I spend my time and energy. And when I started to understand that I had a certain angle in the industry where I was repeating a lot about leadership, that was almost an obsession, to a point where I was visible in conferences talking about it when I built my own studio. And people remember me for this. And I realized, why is that? Because there's a gap. There's a lot of focus in, okay, how do you do a user acquisition strategy? How much is the market worth? So a lot of content in that direction, and it's not wrong. It's just there's a lot, and everybody seems to have an interest there. But how we build, long-lasting companies, in an environment where people thrive and not feel miserable just because we try to make money at the end of the day. There was not a lot of content or conversation around this, at least when I started. So I realized, okay, there's a gap. I do have a nurture skills and interest there. I'll create the space. And in my motivation as well of why I find this restless energy to do it, I think here I try to also understand, over time, what drives me. And it's not only impact, because it sounds a bit like a buzzword, like impact, in the world. Everybody, I mean, that's good. But I like concreteness. I like growth. I like scale, and I have my own definition of what is it to grow in this world, right? And for me, it's self-awareness, being more conscious, being more self-aware, and you will make better decisions for you that will impact others and whatever you need to do, achieve that you care about. So when I could combine my motivation to create a sense of growth and at a bigger scale, and giving in a ownership, not ownership, but autonomy for many leaders in the industry to take power back on their life and not feeling helpless in like victim of situations, and actually they do have a certain power and a way to lead things. I wanted to help there because all my goal was just to enable others. I think to summarize it, it's like I have motivation to enable others to pursue their dreams because I realize I don't have interest to necessarily do a particular game. That's not where my motivation is anymore. So I'm happy to support others to pursue their dreams, but how they do it, this is where I feel I can help. And if it's not taking collateral damage of humans, then I would like to steer more like exactly passionate leaders to do things, but the right way, in a human way.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's where my motivation is and still is today. And that's why I'm involved in so many different things, but they all have the same core, like what I'm doing right now as a GM at Savage, which is restructuring the company, helping through the transition, investing in other companies, the Rise and Play platform. It's all around this definition that I just shared.
I think that's amazing. And I wanted to know how you cultivated this self-awareness in your life. It's very interesting to me personally because I care about this a lot. As you might know, I'm the resident philosopher, and it's very funny. Some things you said, I was just talking about with my colleagues at a place that I'm building right now called Medley here in Berlin, and we talked about our core philosophy, and it's all about agency, what you described as autonomy, I think is the word you used. We use the word agency, which I think is very similar. And it's kind of like the power, which is a more difficult word, I would say, but the ability to steer yourself in the direction that you want. Of course, winds are always blowing, but you are mostly moving from your own intentions and not just following a script, or specifically somebody else's script or a cultural script, but you're like unearthing your own script, which is not so easy. And if I listen to you, I always feel like, man, she really knows. She's done the work. And so I'm wondering, what work have you done to be able to have this self-awareness? How have you cultivated that? What have you read? How did you find an interest in it? If you would like to share that story.
Sure. And it's been a journey, as you may suspect.
It always is. It always is. Fellow journey people here together, yes.
Yeah, but it started with some really strong triggers and hitting the wall. So, and it's I don't know, at the same time sad, but a blessing that it happens in painful circumstances. But for me, the big trigger was in 2016 or 17. I was in Finland at the time, and I moved from Berlin. I was working at Wuga, and then I took a new job at Rovio in Finland, and I was with another partner at the time, where my life was more centered around the relationship and being with someone. So then I would just move country, lose my connection, my friendship, just to make a relationship work. And it was not conscious at the time. I thought it was the right thing to do for me in my priorities. And that relationship when I was in Finland didn't work out for many reasons that were more fundamental in our in the couple than the circumstances. Of course, I didn't know at the time, but when he had to leave Finland to work somewhere else, and I was by myself in Finland, I had a really hard time because I had a choice I made to move to Finland was for a couple that didn't exist anymore. And so I was in personal crisis, and I was wondering, why is it hitting me so hard? Like, I had really dark thoughts at the time of not finding really reasons to leave. Sometimes it's strange because, when you look at outside, it's just a relationship. But I think emotionally we are experiencing things that are very personal and have an origin much further than what is actually happening. And when that happened, I had two options: either go back to Berlin, which was not felt like going back, or going to my parents' home in Brittany, which was an even worse option, or stay in Finland. So I decided to postpone any decision and get clarity on myself. So at a time when I was really losing touch on the ground for many things, even work, I took a break. I stumbled on a personal coach. And so for the funny anecdote, and because I feel safe in this group to share because of how the conversation is going, it was not even a personal coach with intent. He was a love coach. So he was a love coach where maybe it was marketing taglines like, how do you get your ex back, or something like this. And so I was so desperate, and I thought, I was really guilting myself. Thought, what did I do wrong? How can I make him come back? And so through the whole process, he was a personal coach disguised as a love coach, and I understood what he was doing. He was asking me a lot of questions. What do you want? And take care of yourself, set goals, do new things, meet new people, and then we can talk about getting your ex back. So I followed like a small program for 2-3 months, putting, like, I had a calendar, a table, and every day I set a goal. Like, I would talk to a new person or do a new activity. And every week I had new goals with new results. And after those 3 months, I had like the close in of the coaching. And then he asked me, okay, so like, what about the ex? Like, I don't care. I don't want I have an amazing life here in Finland. I have made friends. It's like, I have I'm creating a new project for Women in Games, the first Halloween event. So I was like full, in initiatives. I was invited to game conferences. So that was a breakthrough where I realized, wow, so you are your actions, like what you do and what you do really influences the perception of yourself and your confidence. So that was like the first lesson where I realized I was really perceiving things based not on reality, but past and legacy.
Right.
And that was the beginning of my journey of, kind of a conversation with myself or with life. Is like, life, you won't trap me again like this. Always try to be aware and always question what I'm doing and why. And if I don't, I will find the support network of the help to have more clarity. And because that was like, I don't want to move country for the wrong reason, or take a job for a wrong reason, or be sad and try to get someone back for the wrong reason. So that was really kind of a lesson. And since then, I studied a lot to read about self-awareness, philosophy, stoicism, be open for different forms of coaching at different phases: executive coaching, personal coaching, also therapy, to explore, understand a bit more what was going on, being more connected with my emotions, body scan. So I just compiled a lot of tools over the past now 7 years, and that has become part of my identity. So it's I like to think of it as muscles, that you've never trained for 30 years of your life, and suddenly when you start to do, they become so much part of your habits that you don't even think about it. And so today I have some tools just to take a step back, question, or talk to the right people, to just learn if this is not the right decision, but am I doing it from the right place? But yeah, I wanted to spend some time on this origin of how I got into this, because I see this as well at work, and it's really difficult when I see it in others. It's a very painful, uncomfortable phase, but it's out of this is growth. When it's a slap, in the face, like, wow, you live life maybe in a way that doesn't serve you anymore. You have to switch gears, and that is the journey of many people, right? So redefining your beliefs of life, how you function, and let go of things that are more scripted because they had to. And finding, like you mentioned, Simon, like this self-offering, which is a journey. But when you have the tools and the right support network again around you, then it's a less painful path.
I had a question that came to my mind, and this podcast is very, very different and kind of deeper than many of the others we had. But I am treating you now as the expert on love because you had a coaching on this and I didn't. So I have to ask a question about this. Since you are somebody who reflects a lot and had this coaching and it was really fun to listen to that story. What would you say, and this is far away from gaming, but in general goes really into the personal side. So let's say, and I don't wish this on you, so I wish the best for your current relationship, but would you consider, basically, as you said, you're open to coaching in different ways. Would you consider for each new relationship to go into a coaching session? Or when does a person know, in your opinion, or when do you know when you are ready to focus on somebody else or to have somebody else in your life except for yourself? Like, when do you know what I'm getting at?
Not fully sure.
So I thought, I mean, with the coach, that was a little bit of a joke, but like I was thinking that, so you basically went into this mode where you really looked into yourself, of course, with the help of a coach. And so I thought if you basically could share with the audience in terms of like human relationships in general, I guess it doesn't have to be a couple relationship, but like, how do you decide or how do you feel when you are ready to like be social or active and let people into your life, and when do you maybe think, oh, I need time to reflect, be maybe alone, need to think and reevaluate? Because I feel from the way that you explain it, you do a lot of self work in a way.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. I understand now the question more in the context. Yes. And I think it's, one can think that it's, either or, but I think it's there all the time. And something that I found is like, about routine, it's, it should be there whether you are engaged socially or in a relationship or not. And, at least I can speak from my experience. When it's so important for me, it is, in a way, a lens where someone can meet me to connect, or then as an answer by itself, that we don't have much overlap because we won't have much to talk about or share those things. So I give here concrete examples, but because we are what we value, right? And when we are confident about what we stand for and what we believe in, we start to attract people who believe in the same thing. So then those connections become quite natural, and they don't feel like too much compromise of the time you should spend for yourself and another.
Yes.
I'll come back to that, but there are some nuances, and I think the same for the relationship, where through my journey, I have been as well in former relationship where it was a discovery for me that was more and more important, that I would invest time in it, and that also created the gap more and more with the person where they were not so interested in it, and other things So it's about, where you spend your energy. And in my current relationship, as example, I can give, which is reflecting more where I am in life as well. We do have open conversation as something we have, which is called it will sound very like, I don't know if it's nerdy, but a monthly reflection brunch.
No, I really love this.
Yeah. That's good. That's good.
And actually he was also excited about it. So I didn't have to convince, like, well, it's like, where is the forum, the place to talk about how we are doing as a couple, right? And it's important that we do have a space, to reflect, and a safe space, because I don't believe if we don't talk about it, it will develop well over time. That's my belief. But
Yes.
and it's a choice for a person, like, oh, it's too much for me, I'm not interested, and okay, then bye. Or then it's like, wow, okay, that's super cool, and I do want to work with the reality, and where we have a dialogue. So it also forces maturity in any relationship, and that I learned from work, for example. So I think here again, it's like you will start to create a social group and social connections through those lenses of what you are. And back to when is a good time to connect with yourself. For me, it's also back to emotional reading. I learned that from Esther Perel as well. And it's really based on how you were raised. Were you raised to be self-reliant, or were you raised to depend on others? And I was raised to be self-reliant. So I know when I have something, I'm overwhelmed, I have a lot to think about, I have complex problems or a bit of stress, I need actually to withdraw, isolate, find my space, find my balance, make sense of what's happening, and then I come back, because I know myself. I know other people, like close and from work as well, how they have been functioning this way, who need to talk a lot about it when they are not well. They need to surround themselves with a lot of people. You can call it a certain way of being extrovert. And it's about respecting that as well. So it's again always a dialogue. And in a relationship, for example, it's like if one is like needs a time alone, while the other needs a connection when they are not well. It's about talking about it openly and understanding why there's that difference. But that it's never about the other, right? It's about the self and understanding yourself. And when you care, you will respect that time, whatever your friend or your partner will need.
Florian, have your questions been answered?
Yes.
Nice. I think this is really great. I think this is really something what we're getting into right now. Also, in our last episode with Dirk de Gois, we had a very, very similar line. And so my question was always, you know quite some deep stuff, and I could, riff with you on the deep stuff forever now. But, as we said in your intro, you're also an industry professional. And so, what I think is really impressive is that you bring this deep stuff into your work. And like you said earlier in your story, it also is in an interplay. You learn from that as well. I'm wondering how you do that. And I'm asking also for a friend like Florian. No, I'm kind of wondering sometimes, because I've done my study, of philosophy and my introspection and all that. And I've done it very specifically while I was away from the world. So I didn't have a job. I didn't need a job. I could focus on that. But then you're not with, you have both of your legs in the inner world, so to speak. You're away on the mountain, you're not part of the village, part of the culture. And I feel like what you're doing is more like, okay, you're going inside, but you're always working. And so you manage to bring in a negotiation between the more esoteric things, which, as we know, are very practical, but not everybody knows that. But you're kind of bringing it properly into the working world, the pragmatic world, you could say. And I feel like you're doing it without fear. And I'm wondering, and I'm I'm assuming you're doing this consciously, and I was curious about your thoughts on that. That kind of relates to what we said earlier, that you felt this urge to also teach, you know.
Mm-hmm.
So how is that for you, and how did you manage that? Are you not ever afraid that people think, oh, what's she talking about? You know, how do you see that?
Yeah, it's funny. I haven't thought about this for some time. I definitely did in the early days. Like, oh, it's like like talking abstract concept or hoo or even like things. And I know especially in the world of tech and many men where it's not so known. So I think here the key word is really practical, and I'm very pragmatic in my way of doing things. So that's maybe where I have like this talent and gift, like the combination of seeing things that are hard to grasp, not so tangible, but put it into a really concrete way. And that's also when I thought at the time, okay, I see that it's important to be self-aware. It's important to listen, have empathy. Those are kind of a bit abstract concepts for most of the people I had to work with.
Yeah, listening very difficult. Yeah, very abstract. Yeah.
But it is because we
Yeah.
are very in the, like again, tangible sensing. So I thought if I want to do have impact with what I say, I need to translate and I need to put it into action. So that's kind of what is the result of my masterclass. It was not like, oh, okay, like hire people without bias. Like, what does that mean? So I was very factual here. Okay, what is the method and so on. So very methodical, and it's something I have developed over time, how to turn into something methodical and actionable what I'm talking about. Even when it comes to self-awareness, it's like, okay, feel your body scan is like, no, concretely how it is. How do you develop? So I can talk about it with specific sensing language.
You practice that consciously, that you could speak like that and explain like that?
Yes, and I also learn more how to develop it. So back also to your comment, how did I develop that? Well, I was always kind of busy with something. It's like people around me are my main inputs of growth. So I love to meet many people, very different, in different situations, because that's how I read the world and understand all the different differences, nuances of people. And then I can make a sense of like the mapping of the complexity of any topic I approach. So for me, it's like kind of I collect a lot of input with my work, the places I choose to be, the project I choose to do. And then I retreat. So I dedicate a lot of what I call white space in my calendar, where it's time no one can book for me. Some people may think that I'm not working, but I do. And then I think and I take a step back and I try to make sense. So I'm also very conceptual thinker in that sense. And then I make sense of all the data points I have. And then when I have enough, I come back out of the shell, I present the plan, I get more input and so on. So it's an iterative process and it comes from my product thinking. So I don't do it with consumer, with the product, but the product for me is an organization, a process, how to approach thing, a method. And then I always connect with who's my audience, to get input. So I try to mix both. And then I try to translate it as well. Same with the product thinking, who's my audience and what is important. And I'm learning all the time. Recently, for example, I learned, at least in the current work I have, that context was confusing people when I was sharing too much context. So I decided to flip my communication, and that depends on the environment, and to go straight to the point. What is it I'm asking? Like no, I would say no chit chat, no bullshit. Like hello, is like
Bottom line first. I
yeah,
know it well.
exactly. And
Yeah,
then people,
exactly.
if they want, they can read the context. So
Yeah.
if I didn't have the input, I couldn't change it. So that's where everything is connected to help me, well, continue on my path, get better and understand, different environments and how humans work.
Yeah, just a quick comment. I think Florian has a question, but from my end, now that you're saying this, I'm like, oh, okay, I see something, because your communication is incredibly clear. It's very funny. It's like while you were explaining it, I'm like, oh, she's doing it right now. So that's really cool. Like that's very enjoyable, and it goes into ear and brain easily. So yeah, good stuff. That's amazing.
Something that I was wondering while you were talking about this point is, as Simon just said, you speak very concisely. You know what you want to communicate. And I think you obviously map out where you want to be at the end of a conversation, or like what your goals are in a way. And let's say in a management role, obviously there are always tough decisions to be made that could impact people's lives. Maybe somebody has to leave the company. Maybe a project has to be cut. Whatever. There's tons of things in the work field that could happen where there could be communication that sees you have to do a decision as a managing person towards that impacts somebody else. So how do you like bring together this energy that you have of wanting to make places best for people and like making the environment perfect with this obvious task that you might have to do at some point where you need to bring bad news, or where you need to tell somebody, something that they might not be ready to hear?
It is a very challenging situation, and I don't think there's unfortunately a magic formula at all for it. And from my conversation with many Rise and Play speakers, but I can share at least where I am in my journey about my learnings, learnings where it has gone well. It was really tricky, and some that I learned something, and then I have to, I add something in my toolbox, and I need to read better the situation next time. I think a lot of those things happened with my studio at Voodoo, where at some point, I knew it was maybe killing the game. And the whole team was really putting all their heart, their passion into the game. It was stretch goals at Voodoo, because it's like making a casual game with hyper casual goals. It was intense, and the team was really doing their best. And at the same time, I had really from the top management, the requirements, and like repeating at every meeting, it's like, oh, it's borderline for Plantopia. And my decision was, how much should I share to the team and prepare them mentally for what's coming? Or when I'm not sure, it's not going to help them to know that we will kill the game. So here, the way I manage it, where from the moment I knew it could happen in 2 months, 3 months, 6 months, it's like sharing the numbers of the game, the requirements, the thing work in progress, putting people at your level, because anyone who's minimum educated can understand it's not like a rocket science if you explain it. And also trusting people that they can manage, emotionally. It's not always the case, but it's being there, like with a maximum of empathy. I remember how I was doing this communication is like also expressing my own feelings. How do I feel about the situation? So we are all on the same boat. It's not like I try to give that cold image from the management, like we will maybe kill the game and we will be fine. It's like, no, I feel sad that like we put a lot of efforts here, and we are part of a company that is financing our team. They're expecting a return on investment. That's the cold reality, and we are working with that. And we are trying to push this game that could be the one that give return, but it may not be given the current numbers and the time we're given. And everyone can understand that I'm not doing an arbitrary decision, but there are things that are beyond us and beyond even the company. Because when I explain, well, we have raised funds from investors, Goldman Sachs, and they are not like, doing a charity donation. They are investing in a company. So when people understand all of this, like the whole system, and they have the right to not agree with it, but they understand this is where the day when we had to kill, but people were sad, but they they had absorbed kind of the decision already along the way, instead of like this hard reality and shock. So, for example, this is where when it went well. And same for the studio closing. It went really abruptly, but I was the same way, very transparent. Like, I'm learning the decision right now. I'm doing with what I can. And people trusted my integrity. So they trusted what I shared was really what I knew. And then we worked with that. I give another example here where it didn't go so well. And it's, like more with either in the past as well. And this is more a point of development for me, is sometimes I try to approach the conversation from a factual point of view. So the two examples I gave you is like, okay, those are the facts. This is the situation. And, that's the reality. We try to deal with that. And when the conversation is on an emotional level, so the need is not on the reasoning side. It's not for me to really try to convince or explain something to the person, but the need they have in the moment is to be seen or heard emotionally. And I have misread that a few times, where all they wanted was, a good tap on the shoulder. You're doing a great job. I believe in you. And when in that moment, I would come and say, okay, this part of the work was good. This part of the work was like still work in progress. And they lack maybe the confidence, and I could not read that. So the need sometimes are on an emotional level, and I have made mistakes there. And when I understand that things escalate after, I realized we were really not on the same level of conversation, and I didn't read that, right? So it's a learning process always for me, that part. Because there, it's a very different conversation when you're here to focus on the person's, like, I will have them feel better. And then I trust that they will do the work they're supposed to do. But first they need to feel better, and I can help there. But if I focus only like, okay, I'll point you to the things that you need to do better, this will make things worse. Yeah.
Yeah, this will make things worse because you're kind of out of sync, right?
Yeah.
I think about sync a lot, as in you're synchronous. So you're like, you can imagine you're in a certain gear in a car, and then the clutch and the thing are rolling at the same time, right? And when you're revving the car wrong while you're shifting, it goes like, or you're shifting into the wrong gear. And that really happens, I think, when all the time, by the way, like a misunderstanding is basically you're being out of sync. You're not talking at the same frequency, you could say. You're not vibing right. And, you are in your head with some goals, or, you're trying to, like you described, make something right on your scale that you're operating on within your scope right now. And of course, you're right about what right means for you. But then for the other person, they might be in a completely different scope. And so there are things you can do, like asking people, wait, if you have sensitivity for that, you can kind of, you look at somebody, you talk to them, and you notice that your words are not reaching them. At least I know this, or I noticed this, and then you're like, wait a minute, there's no jar for me to put my words in right now. There's no receptivity, and you can kind of feel this resistance in the energy as you talk, which I'm sure many people don't feel. So I feel like that's what you're also about in your explanations, like kind of raising this kind of empathy or sensing level, right? You mentioned some term using the word sensing a couple of times now, I think. What was that?
Yeah, sensing language.
Yeah, what does that mean for you?
Like it's really facts, things I can touch, things I can see, things I can hear. It's I got that from was it MBTI, like the sensing, and what was the opposite language? Feeling language, I think.
Oh, MBTI is Myers-Briggs.
Yeah, but I don't use it like as a reference for psychological things, because I never professional psychology say, like, okay, it's not really, it's like as accurate as the horoscope, but I did like the definition of sensing communication style. It's like very factual, like, things you can touch, can see, can hear, and people who are in the sensing communication understand each other, but people who are talking about things abstract, conceptual, it's like things you cannot see, touch, and ideas. It can be very frustrating for people who just need a sensing communication.
Right. And so that, I'm just trying to map this out. That doesn't have something directly to do with what I talked about earlier. What you talked, kind of this noticing what another person needs. That's a bit of a different topic, right?
Yeah, I think here it's about expectation, where because the person who's sometimes in emotional distress may not be even aware that they are. And
definitely, all the time. Nobody knows, right? Like most people don't know their inner state, right?
Yeah, and so it's even harder than for you as sometimes the manager or the lead to read that and to switch gear of conversation. Because for me, I have a toolbox. I have different style of communication. I think that's also something worth mentioning. You're not just one person and persona, especially in leadership roles. You adapt to your audience. So sometimes I have straight to the fact with, especially in my leadership team, it's funny, we did or a team assessment test, like leadership, and we are kind of the same in the style of leadership, like shaper, commander. So that's why we cut to the chase, we talk about the things, and we groove really well together in this language. But I cannot keep talking like this when I go to a team or staff level and then ask something, because it's intimidating. It's like, so I need to switch. I need to, okay, who's my audience again? What is the mindset of a person? And what is it I need to communicate? And this is still a learning process, because again, back to self-awareness and having space. If I find myself busy the whole day, back to back, I switch meetings, I just don't have the space to think few minutes, like, okay, what is the conversation I'm about to have? And what is the mindset I should have in this conversation? So again, back to really having time for yourself in leadership position, influencing roles is really important, to put intention in what you do.
Yeah, I think that's always the main, for me, that's the main thing that the word meditation encompasses. Like, it's not sitting cross-legged on the floor and going, necessarily. It's actually making space between actions and reactions, or even between blocks in your calendar. It's kind of like a moment of breath, and between two things, so you can recollect, center, meaning that you kind of, all your words are also, people speak a lot in leadership. It's like arms, your words are like limbs that are reaching out to others, that are trying to shape something, like you said, and then you're kind of reeling it all back in. It's like tidying up your workplace after you use it, like tidying up yourself as a workplace after you've done thing A. Now you're going into thing B, and maybe before that you want to tidy up. So the space that is you can kind of use maybe for a similar, but also for a different purpose. And I think that's, for example, maybe to use some of your clear type language, what centering means when people say it. It's not very woo. It's like very practical. It's like tidying up your space.
Yeah.
Florian, back in action?
Yes.
Question?
Yes. Yeah, I had a question, which is a follow-up to my previous question, where now I would actually like us to swap the perspective. So I asked you how you deal with the communication of some bad news happening, but you also told us before that you felt in your time as an employee, basically, also this, you want to make some change, and your leadership, you didn't feel able to do anything like this. So I would like you to maybe give some advice, if you can, to people who are in this situation as well, that maybe they don't know if their superiors, if their leadership people know exactly what's going on. They might feel like we're not getting the clear message at the moment. We might want to change, but we don't see a way of getting it through to them. Could we go into that direction a little bit?
So what you do when you do have thoughts of like influencing and so on. So I learned that also with Stoic reading. Focus on what you can control and what you can't control, right? So when I think it's, and having the wisdom to act on the things you can control. So that would be my first advice to, where do you want to spend your energy, right? So, and what is worth spending your energy on? So being really clear, what's your area of impact? So if you are in a leading position, you have your own team. You do have influence on your own team, which is already a good starting point. And there's a lot of good impact you can do on individual and group level. Even if it's 1, 2, 3, 5, 10, 20, it's already a good start. So maybe it's a perspective to have. And second is inside an organization, if you are not in a position of power or you are a lead, but there are other leads above you, and then ultimately the CEO, and you see things really disturbing happening in the organization and you don't know what to do. Again, what do you control? So you control only your own behavior, right? So what you see, how you perceive things, what you say. So in my attempts of trying to change things, I've always communicated. So I think in the right environment, of course, and this is a test in itself of your own culture and company culture, is giving the feedback, whether it's to your boss, whether it's if there's kind of an anonymous, suggestion box, as many companies have sometimes, or writing directly an email to the CEO explaining, the things, the changes you would like to suggest, giving a feedback. And again, you do have control on how you communicate it. And the way you communicate it will also influence the outcome. But at least there's a way to try. And I always like to think that there's nothing to lose to say something. And then you will always learn something more from it, right? So you will learn, either you are in a company where feedback are not valued, like bottom up. And then that it's, you have a company where the leadership will never change, and it's an information for yourself. Like, are you okay with that acceptance, or is this not the environment you want, and what do you want to do about it, right? Or like I did as well, like when I felt like I cared, I wanted to stay, I cared about my team, but I did want to share with others on a leadership level. CEOs felt, well, let's think bigger and let's start to share outside of the company. And that was the right call, because nobody stopped me. I was not frustrated. And those conclusions come when you start to think and focus, like, what can I do today? And what do I have control now? Or you change your perception once again, if you can, and be happy as well that it's not so terrible where I am. I tried, I gave the feedback, things will change in a year, it's fine, and then I can focus on my own team, right? So at least those things, perception or actions.
So I don't want to super interrupt this kind of talk, but we still want to cover more topics. One specifically of my interest is that you also invest into companies, and maybe we are not even veering that far away from where we are now. But the question that I could think that might still leave us in this sort of direction is, how do you advise people to invest, or how do you choose to invest in a company? What are the things that you are looking for? And I would assume of how I got to know you in this talk, that this would correlate with your way of how you build teams.
Indeed. And that's my personal choice and way of investing. So, of course, the first primary motivation to invest in the investment world is to have a return, right? That's kind of a nature of it. But that's not how I invest only. So of course there's a business lens, like, do I believe a company is building a product that the market needs, where there's an audience? So basic things like this. That's why I'm not investing like particularly on super risky business like Web3, for example. I decided not to, because I don't understand it enough, and I prefer to invest on the industries, areas that I can understand at least. That's why I mentioned Zencaster, because I've been using it. I know the product. I know a bit of the market. And I have a lens of the team as well, the founder. So I've also created my company in the past, a long time ago in Berlin, not in games, fashion mobile company. And I learned also by stopping the company, closing the company, like having really the commitment of the founders, why they are founding this company, is a sign of longevity. Is it like worth supporting? Because there's also many opportunistic moves in the industry when the money was available. And so build a company quickly together with a group of your friends, ex-colleagues who were laid off from somewhere else. There's maybe this good game we can do right now. Let's build it and go. But once the market shifts or the game doesn't work, do the founders have a really strong why to still be there for another game, another product, and try again, etc. So what I look at is the resilience of the founders, like how committed are they for the mission that justifies the existence of their company. So for the ones who exist more for the opportunity, and it's like more luck, like lottery. It's also worth the investment, but that's not my kind of investment. So I really invest in teams, founders, why they built a company. And at last, because I see it's missing in the space, if I can, I will invest in companies with women in the founding team. Because once I invested as well, it's my way of believing in them. If I, of course, believe in their business, but I have skin in the game, and I will do everything possible in my network to help them succeed. And like recently, it was funny. I was doing a play test for one company I invested in, and she recorded me for the play test session, and then shared it with investors. So that was a great way to help, because I'm known in the space, and if that helps as well for the credibility of the product, and I'm the target audience. So it's also a way of supporting my own mission in what I would like to see in the space. I believe that many interesting games, good products will emerge by being founded by different people and teams.
So that is actually what other people would maybe call putting your money where your mouth is, basically, if you would use an idiom. So investing in the things you believe in, and seeing the right messaging. And I can see that it makes complete sense in terms of course, that is very consistent with the way you approach things and with the way you communicate. So yeah, I can definitely see that. Staying on the investment topic, because you have been in many different countries, or at least also in different companies over your time. So you have a lot of industry experience. I would like to talk a little bit about Berlin with you, and especially in the context of its industry, and in the context maybe also of investment. What is your view of Berlin as a game producing or game creating city?
Yeah, so but it has evolved for sure a lot since the past. And now it will be 10 years since I've been in Berlin, like 2024. My God. Because when I came to Berlin, Wuga was the big company, like super hot, startup growing, like working like a modern tech company. And there were more over traditional company like Ubisoft, AAA, not so many mobile studio. And 10 years later, they have been like, I would call it sometimes as a for fun, we have a Wuga Academia, or alumni group even on Facebook, and all the people who have worked at Wuga at some point have joined other companies, created their own companies, and then have really contributed to the ecosystem. So these days, I know 10 to 15 mobile studios that were formed by ex-Wugas.
Yes.
And then King as well came, and a few other. So there are many companies there, many talents. But after spending some time in Finland, where it's kind of a similar ecosystem, many small to big size companies, but they have an amazing community, active community network. They have a IGDA. Every month, all the people from different game companies would gather, exchange knowledge. All the CEOs knows each other. So it was super active and felt like a neat, tight community. And in Berlin, it's happening more one-on-one, so I meet some of my game friends one-on-one through lunch and so on, but there's no, at least known, recurring event where we all know about, and this is the meetup point where we all meet, as powerful as IGDA. So I still miss, today, this community, this network routine, and it has to be led by someone also sponsored, because IGDA has been run this way. I thought of again helping there, building the network there, but you have to pick your battle, and I decided on Rise and Play. But I remember I put at some point in my list when I moved back to Berlin, I tried to create Women in Games Germany, and I never get to the time of that, unfortunately. So for example, we don't have a Women in Games Germany entity. I'm not sure if we should have, but UK has a very strong community there. France, now Women in Games in Finland is called We in Games, to include, not only a group by gender, which I like, but we don't have a similar group for women or underrepresented groups in games that is strong and known, big and known. So still a lot to do in the network part, in my opinion.
Yes. And actually, this is I didn't even plan on going in that kind of direction, but now we actually can talk shop live on the podcast, because obviously together with Fine Games, we started Female Founders Dinner as a sort of starting point last year, where you also were a guest.
Yeah.
And so I see, especially, of course, MediaNet, which is the association that is the overlooming entity above our project. We think that it's important to create these kind of spaces. And I think we should just stay in touch after the podcast and decide or talk about how we can improve on that together.
Yeah, I'd love that.
Perfect. Simon, are you back with us?
I'm back with us. I've been praying that the Zencaster recording is intact. I hope we didn't curse it when we said Zencaster is great and has never failed us. Let's see. I have one more question to round this out a bit, and then we have our essential question that we ask all our guests. It seems to me that the way you describe your life and your activity and your productivity, you have a very gamey, a very purposeful and also very gamey setup in your life. You mentioned pick your battles, so you kind of know where you put your energy. I would bet you're pretty organized, and your podcast has many episodes. You have some distinct products out, like the master classes, and you're doing this with the very bootstrappy, simple attitude, like we said in the beginning. And I'm wondering if that is true, and I would like to ask you in this context about vision and long games, if that means something to you. I would bet it means something to you. So is my assumption correct about your little personal Harvest Moon satisfactory life machine? And how do you see all that?
Yeah, it's a good guess, but I never thought of it like in a more rigid definition of games, but play. So one of my actually values that I managed to verbalize over time, because I do this every 6 months. I do a value revision for myself. So I write down what I think are some core values or what drives me in my action and priorities, and I revisit them. And one of those that has been consistent now past 6-7 years has been the playfulness. So I think this is where this whole gamified thing comes from, and why I work in games as a creative field, because I approach many activities of my life as a play. It's an experiment. It's a playground. So it's not scary. If you fail, you can try again. You die digitally, you lose a heart or whatever. You learn new skills, so, I approach as well, like the work in a playful way. And I give a concrete example here where these days I'm taking care of rethinking the people organization at Savage, which usually includes finance, HR, admin, which are, I would say, quite traditional business department, corporate departments, and sometimes don't fit always well in the game world. So I try to rethink it as a game designer or product manager. And in games, we think a lot about funnel, like first time user experience. What is the player experience? Do you come back on the first day and 7 days and 1 month after? Or how was your onboarding? And these days, I'm rethinking the whole employee experience, EX. How do we craft and design our employee experience? What is the first touch point? What was the first impression? How do you onboard? How was your day 1? How was your day 7? How is your day 30? And how do you sunset as well? So thinking of it from an experience point of view instead of very corporate, process heavy way of handling employees as resources, and more as an experience. So I do have games and play in many aspects of my life, and Rise and Play is again in the name, right? That's the reason why. And in the tone of the conversation I have on the podcast, and in the activities I do, and the way I do events. So if you have a chance to talk to people who have been part of my company events, I've had the most epic events, at least some in Berlin and at Wuga. I just give an example here where after we were working on Diamond Dash with the team, and I took the whole team to Amsterdam for a weekend. I will not say more about what happened in Amsterdam, but we had the most epic event as a team, and they loved it. And it was a great way to celebrate a good years of the game and closing a project. So I love to organize those because I'm about experiences. What is the experience we can create?
Great. And then would you like to say something about vision and long games?
Mm-hmm. So vision is, what you strive. I like to refer first to a definition before I can answer. Like what will you strive for, or you will try doing that you would die trying, but you will never reach, right? So that's kind of how I see a vision. And I did some self-offering actually recently, end of last year, where I crystallized, at least for me, that I believe by bringing more self-awareness in people, that we will have more, equality, like social justice, fair treatment, empathy in how we do things in this world. So, and then I have a mission deriving from this, right? But my core belief is like, if people would have a little bit more of self-awareness and love, self-love was another aspect, then there would be many things that would be approached very differently. So instead of treating the problems, I would love to treat more the source. And then, that's part of my mission, to try to give more awareness and tools and creating connections around this topic. And the long game, the way I think about it, and I don't know if it's like wisdom and age. I'm in a point of life where I don't really have a fixed destination. Like, okay, once I do that, I'll be done. So it's more, I think of experiences. What is that I want to learn now or do now? What is the process that I could enjoy? And if I don't enjoy the process of what I'm doing now, what could I add to it to enjoy more of the process of doing it? So I always look at how can I enjoy the how of what I'm doing instead of the result of what I will get. And that's my long game, like not being attached too far to some fixed goals, because now I know that they evolve and they will evolve.
Beautiful. I think it's a great recipe for having a lot of fun long term. We have essential questions that might actually relate to this a little bit. We ask them to all of our guests, and you can reply kind of briefly, but if the spirit moves you, then you can also be longer. The essential questions, you could say, are a sort of experience. Okay. Number one, what inspires you?
Inspired people. I work a lot with energy. So for me, when I see people having energy and, something that they're passionate about, they want to fight for it, something that animates them, I'm really inspired and energized by the presence of that. Even like our conversation today is really nice. So yeah, I'm inspired by people who are inspired and have a drive to do something.
Sweet. And thank you. Number two, what would you say is the purpose of your being?
So yeah, back to a definition I gave. Let me see if I can find it quickly, because I wrote it down. So if you don't mind, just 1 minute. I need to get back to it. What did I write? So I just want to say it correctly. Yeah. So the reason of my being. So I identified like really enabling others and connecting people. So I do have a lot of energy, and I see what people don't see sometimes about themselves, and I see how they could match as a group and glue and create something great together. So that's my way of enabling others. It's like creating groups and communities, teams, like a puzzle, complementing people, and then let the magic happen.
Number three, what's a beautiful day to you?
I remember having that question in therapy, so maybe I'll answer the same thing. Light on my face, sunlight on my face. I wake up, so it's probably the summer or somewhere warm. Coziness and having my coffee, making the process of making my coffee, and like a slow morning, and just like being like fine with myself in this state. So that's my definition of a good day. But maybe thinking on the big overall day, where I would not have a feeling of regret of something I could have done that I didn't do, or something if I don't have feeling of regret, that's a good day as well.
Yeah. It was very funny, an unusual thing. I thought about the question a bit myself right now, which I usually focus on what the guest is saying, and my inner voice said something like, when the work of the day is done, with joy and completeness, and then you kind of said the same. So that's quite good. I think we agree then. Question number 4: what is the change you want to see in the world?
Well, people learning more to love themselves, because like learning more about anthropology, history, psychology, a lot of things that are done are also filling a gap that is in yourself, right? I mean, it's I don't want to generalize, but it has a lot of origins there. So if you already whole with yourself, the kind of decision you can make, I think would be, more beneficial for others around you.
And how do you contribute to this change that you want to see?
Giving the tool, creating the tools to give awareness that there are things that you can learn about yourself, that a lot of things that you think are coming from outside or caused by the outside are actually coming from the inside.
If you would start a new safe game in your life right now, what occupation would your new character have?
Oh, I'm playing some new RPG these days, and I really struggle to find. But I've been drawn to. It was, I think, Elden Rings, and there was like 8, 10 casts. I don't remember, and I was really struggling. But I think I was drawn personally to kind of a warrior type. Like hero type, is like strong, like coming with confidence and like would crush everything on their way, like not feeling apologetic and like I have my mission and I will save something. So I'm more drawn to, the warrior character.
Nice. And last question from me: do you have books that you often recommend, or that you like to give to people, or that have influenced you the most? Could give a top 3 if you'd like.
Mm-hmm. Oh, tough because I have quite many, but I'll try to come back to.
I thought so.
I try to come back to the ones that I come back to often. So first, culture map to just really realize that we are different and we are the product of culture. And once you understand that, it's never about you or how is someone to you again. It's more how we were, beyond socially and so on. And that creates more empathy. So culture map has been very helpful in multicultural teams and just context in general. Second book has been The Daily Stoic. I've read it actually. The Daily Stoic, I read it on 365 days. So I think it was one quote a day. And that really, I incorporated it, like it became part of me. So it was really powerful and solid in creating habits. And so that's why now it's really part of me. And at last, the 15 Commitments of Conscious Leadership from a great author who's one can say when you read the book, you think, oh, is it some spirituality here? But it's very concrete. And you understand basically a lot of things as a leader. You have to take a lot of responsibility for what's happening in you and out of you. And it's a mindset thing, right? So when you're taking charge of yourself and own everything, then that changes a lot, again, how you approach things and be always in a constant curiosity of learning, growing instead of, blaming others, etc., or overwhelmed.
Beautiful. Thank you.
I am currently struggling a little bit with my cat because he actually wants to ask questions.
I know. Like mine just was here also a few minutes ago, but she gave up.
Yeah. Mochi. Oh, I will be finished. No. Okay. Well, then you stay. What are your favorite games? Also, a top 3, maybe.
All time?
Yeah, sure.
Okay. Oh my God. Final Fantasy VII.
Mm-hmm.
First game, 3D, RPG, also a bit of with romantic stories, everything. It's like, epic story, epic game. So, still one that has really marked me. Oh, sorry. Time for my
Oh my God,
tea.
so funny.
We have cats and doorbells. That should be the title of this episode.
Oh my God, so funny.
And the second game, I think is Life is Strange, has also into the narrative because it's choice, human choice, and like it makes you. It's the first experience, again back to experience of game I've had that made me reflect on having empathy. Like you really in the character, and you make really hard choice that the life of your friends depend on. So it was really well done. And the last game, more recent of a few years, it's Zelda Breath of the Wild. Beautiful game. I can't count the hours, but this way of exploring and discovery, it's a masterpiece from Nintendo. So, yeah.
Really great range there. Yeah, our essential questions are a little bit shorter this time around. So the last question is, where can people find you? Meaning online. Where should people look you up?
So where I'm most present is, of course, LinkedIn as a professional network. But otherwise, with Rise and Play that we talked a lot about, on riseandplay.io, the website where I have the links to the masterclass, helpful for anyone starting a studio or a team, or the podcast if you want to hear from all the awesome, I would say, a bit invisible leaders of industry, because I go source them and find them. And that's the first, sometimes, public, appearance. And they have great insights, and different perspective on, building and leading teams.
Sweet. Sophie, it was such a pleasure talking to you.
Thank you.
Thanks for being our final guest and sharing this episode with us. All your insights and stoicism.
And
Yes.
a lot of advice.
A lot of advice, yeah.
Additional love advice.
Exactly, yes. I feel prepared now to go dating. Little submarine question in there. Yes, to the listeners, hope to hear you soon, or for you to hear us soon. Thanks for listening, and until next time, soon, TM.
We'll be back.
And thanks for inviting me. It was a lot of fun. And I felt like I just missed a glass of wine to make like this as a proper evening talk. But it was really nice question. And I hope we get to meet in person after this conversation.
Perfect.
Yeah,
me too.
That would be great. Thank you as well from me. Thank you for 22 episodes, Florian. And also shoutouts to Zebi, our producer, in the back. Also shoutouts to Anne, our editor. And shoutouts to everybody who listened to us for whether it's just one episode or 22 or something in between. It's been a great 2 years with GamesNet Berlin Europe. And thank you for rounding out with us, Sophie. It was a very spirited episode with many cats and doorbells and great things. So yes, big thank you from me as well. And hope to see you and hang out.
Yes, thanks. Take care.
Bye-bye.
Goodbye.
Hi there, Simon here. Thanks for listening to this episode. If you like what you hear here and you would like to hear more here, feel free to follow or to subscribe to the podcast on whichever platform you get your audio fix. We appreciate you, and we promise you to bring you many more insightful conversations with fantastic games industry guests from Berlin and from all over Europe. Thank you very much, and see you very soon. Bye-bye.
Hi there. Before you go, this is Florian, Project Manager for GamesNet Berlin Europe. If you want to stay connected to the network, find out more about upcoming events and links to other MediaNet initiatives, you can visit us at gamesnetberlin.eu and subscribe to our newsletter. Thank you so much for listening to our podcast, and until next time.